I'm going to get started 1 second. Okay, so I guess we had another great week of learning a lot of things. Before we go further, is there anything you wanted to, any ideas you wanted to share, anything like that? Otino?
Uh, we're doing Parashat Tazria-Metzora. Just the concept of, I might have mentioned it in one of our shares this week, but how Hashem caused, Zarat to show up in the houses, and when we show up, it's like, oh my goodness, it has, the sages come out with different reasons, why this would happen. But one of them was like, okay, you have to tear down the house, and when you tear it down, you find the treasures that decay, and I say hidden. It's like Hashem will put you through something, but little do you know, it's to bring out that gem, it's to bring out that hidden treasure that's inside of you. You know what I mean? So it's just having that trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and understanding that everything he does is Gamzula Tova. Everything. You might not understand it, but that's where Amuna comes in. And you just trust in Hashem, and you're it's kind of like what Moshe Rabbeinu, like found the sapphire underneath his tent. Like it was like boom, he's rich, he's wealthy now. It's like you just have to just trust in Hashem, and no matter what you're going through in life, just have that trust in him and you'll find that treasure.
Yeah, on that point, when we say everything is for the good, everything is for the good. This type of idea, um, this type of idea is connected to the understanding that we're in this world to go through various experiences that correct our soul. Sometimes those experiences come through great success, and those challenges that come with great success, as we overcome those challenges or those tests, like our forefather Abraham Avinu, right? We have the ability for perfection because of Abraham, spiritual perfection. And there's going to be times of great disappointment, right? And you're going to be challenges in those things. And then there's going to be times of, things are in between. So when we say all this for the good, all of these experiences are simulated experiences that we needed to go through to correct ourselves. So some guys, you see like some guys are like young guys and they got like 8, 9 kids, and you see another guy, who has like maybe 2 kids, or another guy who maybe has 3 kids and he's never even met them. You know what I mean? It's all these different scenarios that people are dealing with, right? And so that particular situation is there, right? It's there, and it's based off of what that person needs. It's like when you go outside and you see your neighbors. You could look at your neighbors and say, "Hey, look at all the different types of tikkunim." Right? This guy is Asian. This person's from India. This person's black. This person's went to university. This person had parents. This person had nice parents. This person had no parents. But all these things that we see are expressions of different tikkunim, right? And the different tikkunim that we experience, right? The different tikkunim that we see is only that. So the reality that Hashem gave to us is a reality that is perfect for our soul's correction. And that was the sin of Adam and Chava, or the chet of Adam and Chava, was what? Is that they didn't believe that that reality that they were in is all they needed. They said, oh, it has to be something else. It has to be, a different idea, right? That's what they thought. That was their mistake, is that they thought they were not in the perfected reality. That Hashem gave them every exact thing. He says, don't eat from the Itzadas. That was it. No, it has to be more. It has to be something different. And so that's where they fell. because every single person is born in the Garden of Eden. No, I lived here and we were in poverty, or I grew up in, Gaza, or in the Ukraines, and there was war going on and all these different things. It's like, yeah, on an external level, these things are very, I chose some very harsh predicaments. Yeah, but what does that have to do? Um, what does that what you know what does that have to do with what does that have to do with the soul needs for its own particular correction, right? You think about the souls that were in Mitzrayim, right? Well, we know that those souls had to go through those processes because that was part of the correction that they needed to go through. We could clearly say that. So why can't we say that about other people who've been in very harsh situations? And then we think, oh, well, look at the person who's living in, luxury, um, too partial. Anyways, so the thing is saying that, like, that dynamic, right? That dynamic of being able to see life from the perspective of different levels of corrections. And the life that we were given is exactly what our soul was needed. Now, and there's different experiences within that, right? Like sometimes, like even when I look at like a lot of the, conflicts that are over like in this part of the world, I see like the Palestinians, I see the Israelis, they have other groups. You have like these people called Druze, you have different Christian sects, you have different people, and you see their lives and they have challenges. Like you see it on TV, right? They got wars and terrorism and suicide, people, God forbid, all types of things like that. And so you see that and you're just like, wow, that's a crazy life. But then there's other aspects of their life that are so incredibly rich. Like when I go on the Temple Mount or something like this, and you see like people up there, like with their moms and their aunties and their kids, and they're eating breakfast or they're eating lunch and praying and reading. You're like, bro, like you could take someone from the best places of Beverly Hills, Bel Air, you know, um, whatever, whatever. You could take people from those places in the richness of just that moment alone, right? Being on the Temple Mount. I'm talking about the Muslims right now. I'm not talking even about the Jews. I'm talking about the Muslims. And you see that richness of life and culture. And yes, they have their set of challenges, but that's what their tikkun needed. That's what their soul needed, right? So it's not like cut and dry. There's certain aspects of people's lives that are way beneath ours in terms of standard of living. And then there's other aspects that are so rich, we never experienced, even a glimpse of that, our entire lifetime. So anyway, so that's this idea of Gamza Latova, this idea of everything is for the good, is really just taking, idea of like everything off of, it's like everything's here for my soul's correction. Right? If I start a business and it's not successful I started this time, I didn't want this time. No, that's what I needed. And through that process, I became different. I grew. I got better. I understood things. You know. Oh, but So anyway, so that's kind of that push. How's the people? How's the delegation in Houston? How are you guys?
All is well. All is well. Baruch Hashem.
Any thoughts or any concepts you want to throw out before we kind of go forward a little bit?
No, no, not no, not at the moment.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so anyway, so this is kind of like a pre-Shabbat, like schmooze, like chill, throwing out some ideas. Otino threw out some ideas, we threw out some ideas. But the thing is, so I want to talk about a couple things that came up this week, right? So number one, it was a great learning week of learning. A lot of things are going on, but one of the things that really came out a lot in this week's learning is the power of restricting against lashon hara, right? And the power of staying away from richilut, right? Right, and understanding that lashon hara is the idea of like speaking negative or disparaging about someone, and then richilut is this idea of hearing, right, gossip about someone else, right? And being able to kind of like really start to create this like creative process of being able to look at, you know, the concept of the mechanism of speech, right? And how that speech itself, I need to really contemplate on speech. I need to understand when I'm speaking or I feel a certain way or I'm trying to accomplish specific things. I need to be able to really reflect on the power of my words and the impact of my words. Right? Now, the thing is, speaking is so powerful. They said like speaking negative about someone is like worse than, you know, all the cardinal sins combined, which is like a crazy concept, right? So it's a humongous problem because it literally destroys. It destroys lives. It destroys potential. It destroys role. I mean, how many, you know, potential engagements were broken up because people spoke Lashon Hara? Like two people that were supposed to be together and came this whole lifetime, and they got right to this point, and then someone else's speech came in and destroyed it. Now, that's arguably like, can you help somebody? You know, you know, there is this idea of having, you know, in the right intentions, right? There is something, you know, built around that, right? And so that idea of, hold on one second, I just uh, uh, okay, it's just like, you know, the last moments of Shabbat. Everyone's trying to figure out things. Okay, so yeah, so that idea of speech, right? And so that was by the Chafetz Chaim, and then now we have this new responsibility on speech, right? And being able to engage in the context of speech and what it means to hear other people's dynamic, because it said that in the same way that it's so destructive, that when we restrict against speaking evil, that we bring down a light greater than even the angels can comprehend, right? And I think from here we could see like why like very like wise people, um why very wise people um don't speak as much, right? They're very careful about their words, right? Because that power of not using and overusing or using in the wrong way is so detrimental that the opposite of greatness is it comes to the ability to restrict. And I also heard somewhere, I don't have a source on this, okay, but I remember hearing years ago that maybe it was right, it could be right, Chief Rabbi Pinchas, I'm not sure, but I think it could have been. But the idea is to say that every person is born with a certain amount of words, right? Like when you're born, like it could be a million words, I don't know. But once we use those words, that's when our soul leaves the body. Now the thing is, it says, but when we speak words of Torah, it doesn't count as those set of words that we were given. Right? Like, so we have a certain words, you know, you go and buying groceries, this, all these different things you're doing, right? Talking to people, sports, whatever, school, education, work, whatever, right? So you have words, you speak, you got to talk. So you don't have so many words set aside. So when it comes to speaking, there are words that you can say that aren't connected to the words that have been set aside, which is Torah. So the more Torah we speak, we saved a lot of those words that we have like kind of like in our storage bank that was given to us like from the beginning. Anyway, since I heard it, I'm pretty sure it was by Rabbi Pinchas. But anyways, I saw this Baal Shem Tov, and well, hold on, sorry about that. I mean, sorry, Baal Sulam. Okay, so I want to just do a little bit of a review, but it's this concept of the resurrection of the dead, right? And I want to go back into Bar Sulam and bring out Rav Ashlag and just really kind of like connect to that idea because it's so important, especially when we're going into Shabbat, right? Because in Shabbat, the sages teach that we get an additional soul, right? So the more, you have in mind, in Shabbat. So what does that mean, the additional soul? Like what does that mean exactly, right? And, obviously there's different ways to understand it, but there's an aspect of expansion of soul, if it may be a better word, right? We receive or we gain our soul that we have is like expanded, right? So like during the week, our soul is like big enough for say our house or where we live at, right? But during Shabbat, it expands to the size of like a football stadium. So on this process, we get this aspect of receiving this expansive soul. And this expansive soul acts like a vessel to receive a tremendous amount of light. So the light that we would receive, like say if our soul was the expansive as our home, right? That would be during the week. But during Shabbat, our soul expands even past our house, right? It expands and expands and expands. It's like we don't see it because we're just, we're in the house and the Shabbat and we're eating and, this whole thing and we're laughing and having a good time. But, if we really contemplated on how expansive our soul is at this moment and how high it is and how much of a connection it is between the upper and lower worlds, you know, that's why like so many religious couples like want to spend time on Shabbat, because it's the soul, it's so expansive that the ability to bring down such holy souls into this world is a thing, right? So anyway, so I want to just kind of like touch on that aspect just a little bit and maybe open it up. But again, the big part of this conversation is just to imagine Shabbat and to okay. So it says V'zeh Shem Amro Chazal. It says Tidim Hametim. So he says like this. So we're jumping in the middle of it. You guys already learned this. We learned this entire Sefer, all 71 chapters, right? We did that, right? So we're just going, this is like, we already know this. I don't know. I don't think Otina was with us. All right. So he says, but this, for all 71 chapters, which is like a big thing, right? He says, this is the meaning of the statement of the sages that in the future, the dead will be resurrected with their blemishes, which will be then healed, which will then be healed. As discussed, this means that the people will be resurrected with the same body they once had, including all of the exaggerated and unrestricted desire to receive. The expression includes their blemishes, refers to the ways in which the body is formed by the system of the worlds of impurity prior to being purified, somewhat through the Torah and the mitzvot. And only then, after the body is resurrected and is in a pure state with its blemishes, it will be healed. And then it will achieve the equation of its form. So I really want to push this idea of this being the month of healing, right? And I don't want to just say that, oh, it's a month of healing where we receive healing, but it's also a month that we could see healing. Like maybe I'm gonna say it again. This is not just a month where we can receive healing, but it's a month we also could see healing, right? Because the ultimate reality, right? The ultimate reality of the end destination is to be completely healed, right? Is to be the aspects that like basically all the wear and tear, all the problems, all the pain, all the agonies, all the injuries that we've had throughout our life is based on consciousness, right? And that consciousness, was connected to this idea of the desire to receive. And so this idea of the desire to receive is what we're, here in this world to overcome, to transform ourselves, to move past it. Why? Because this is the original nature of the soul, right? The original nature of the soul is to share, right? But when it comes into the body, it takes on this intelligence of the desire to receive. So it says, Ve'amru ha'ta'am, shehu shelo amru acher, hu, pore shelo yimaru alav. So he says, the sages also say that the reason for the resurrection with blemishes is so that no one will say that it is another person, right? That's not Otinel. Wait, because Otinel, blah, blah, blah. He says this means that people should not say that the resurrected person is in a form other than what was part of the plan of creation. So as we were just speaking about this idea that everything is part of this plan of creation, everything is going to unfold. What we think is a challenge is really the darkness before the light, right? What we think is that something impossible is when God shows us a miracle, right? And we have to go through this because those experiences changes the nature of our soul. So when we're reincarnated, right? The resurrection of the dead. When we come back, we're going to have the same exact body we left the world with all of its problems. So if the person was sickly at the end of their lives, whatever it was, what people saw them as, that's what they're going to come back as. He says, this means that the people should not say that the resurrected person is in a form other than what was part of the plan of creation. Everything we're experiencing is part of the plan of creation. And this is part of the healing of the makshava, of the thinking process. For the plan of creation includes an exaggerated desire to receive, designed to receive all of the good in the plan of creation. But in the meantime, the body consists of these husks, these things that must be purified. So this whole process of life, everything that we're going through is a series of purifications, right? And this purification process is based about how much we're resisting, right? The more we give ourselves to the Torah, the more we give ourselves to the mitzvahs, the more we turn over our intellect to what is right, to the ways of God, then those husks will be weakened. And so therefore the purification doesn't have to be as intense. So that's anytime you see the Jew, the Israelite, go away from God, his environments have never been good. Anytime he says, "Hey, I've been Jewish enough, and maybe it's time to blend in, and we all kind of understand each other, and you live with each other." As soon as that happens, boop, reality changes. So this whole process is a concept of purification. But in the meantime, the body consists of these husks that must be purified. In the end, it must be the same body. For if that resurrected body included anything else than that of the original body, it would actually be completely different body that is unworthy of all the good in the plan of creation that had been present in the first stage. Understand this well. Okay, so let's stop here for a second. Okay, so before we talk this out, so any thoughts on what we just read? Any reflections? Any thoughts on it? Okay, okay, we'll keep it going. I think you guys are okay. So the things like this. So this process of healing, right, and removing the idea of anxiety, removing this heightened levels of fear, right, is to understand that every experience that we have is there to correct our soul, no matter how much of a different type of movies, right? You got horror movies, God forbid anyone should have to know it, but those things exist. You have horror movies, you have action movies, you have comedies, you have coming of age stories, You have all these things, scary movies, whatever. But that movie that we're in is just that, right? It's something that we're watching, it's something we experience, and the movie can change in an instant. And so when we talk about the idea of Amuna, we talk about hope and all these things, is this really the ultimate idea is just to understand that the movie can change at any second. This is a bad scene in a movie. I don't want to deal with this. Oh my God, this is crazy. It's so much pain and suffering. There's certain movies you go through this. And so that's what we have to understand, that we have the ability to change the movie. But the key to that understanding is rooted in the clear belief of certainty that our souls are in this world to be corrected. In the whole dynamic, this month of ER, this whole month of what the sages have understood is a powerful time of healing, a powerful time of continuity, right? And bringing things together, right? That idea is the healing, right? That idea of understanding that there's a light that allows us to understand that the full process of creation is healing, right? Which means is that everything that we went through, everything that we experienced was part of the plan of creation, even the wounds on the physical body, let alone the emotional ones, right? The people who've died, people we've lost, all of this was a part of this process of this perfected creation, right? And if we understood it clearly, there would be no correction of the soul, right? It's only through the challenge, right, that we get somewhere. So anyway, so that's our kavana going into Shabbos. Jump in. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to because me and a brother that's actually he's beginning to really look towards the halakha. We were talking about it. We're getting ready to have a conversation about reincarnation and the whole concept behind it. And one of the things that I've looked at, especially about what you were just talking about, that the whole idea of reincarnation, the whole idea of the resurrection, how it brings about a type of healing. I look at it from the standpoint of, coming from Christianity, right? It's like oh no, we don't believe in reincarnation. Like reincarnation, no, we don't believe in reincarnation. But there's all these concepts about being born again, right? Being born again. But the idea is that imagine, we don't have to imagine because this is what's really going on, but you have a community that is laden down with burden, okay? And when the connection is made that these burdens that we are going through, or these trials that we're going through, it is because it is connected to sin, connecting to breaking the Torah directly, that you can actually pinpoint and say, oh yeah, the Bible says this is because of this. And when you start studying the sages, this sin is because this is why this is happening, right? Well, the concept of reincarnation gives the people the ability to think in real time and have the mindset that, hey, it's very possible that I am here today trying to correct what I've done in a previous life, okay? And correcting something that it could be an ancestor that I think is an ancestor, but it was really my soul, and here I am today to correct something that they didn't correct. Now, with that mindset, you take full responsibility on your behavior, full responsibility about being accountable to the Torah, to the commandments, right?
Yep.
And you don't put it off on somebody else as is being put off on JC. And what happens is that a community then looks at itself. And if you get that technology, you understand that my community is not going to change if I don't change it. My life is not going to change if I don't change it. And if I don't change it, it's a high potential that I'm going to come back and have to change it in another life. So it's best for me while I am conscious, as I remember you said that a long time ago, early class, about that the Torah is for those that's conscious. If you're not conscious, you're not, it's not going to help you. But rather, if you're conscious and you have a consciousness of this, you're going to spend your time correcting yourself, making sure that you hold fast to the statutes and commandments of the Most High. You're going to guard yourself more, and that's my reflection.
Yeah, no, like it was. I'm taking it in. It's very profound, and I really like the part that you brought out about how when you bring in the concept of reincarnation, it brings us to this standpoint of like this is the life that God gave to us, and I through my free will can make it into what I want it to be or what's going to bring me the closest to the Creator. It's I have that power. So it doesn't matter what the world wants to tell me. Like they'd be like, "Oh, well, you're from the ghetto." Who said that? I mean, we did. Yeah, but I'm saying like, why are you telling me that? Oh, because I want you to look down on where you're from. But why would you want me to do that? Oh, it's just because it creates the class system. Like like you're here, I'm there, the whole thing. And then they'd be like, "Oh, well, you're black." Really? Why are you saying that? Oh, because and because I'm white. Oh, okay. So why are you telling me that? Oh, because you need to know like like who you are, like in the whole scheme of everything, right? So when I say reincarnation, now I change the conversation to the soul. So once I'm now focused on the soul, then the soul is having simulated experiences, right? But those simulated experiences could have been many different things over the course of what I would call a lifetime, right? Which is a time period of a simulated experience. It could be 10 years, it could be 50 years, it could be 100 years, 120 years, it could be 3 months, whatever. But it's a simulated experience, right? For what? The soul's correction,
Now,
right?
I want to jump. I want to ask you a question about what you just said. You know, the idea is that is it possible then if you could have we souls that was a part of the first group that didn't make it out of the wilderness that believed the evil report, and now we having to relive that, but now it's coming in a different form where they're telling, hey, you're black, you live in the ghetto, hey, you're nothing, hey, you're poor, and you're ignorant, and these different things. And it's up to us. Maybe the correction is not believing that evil report and changing the dynamic, and saying, I'm not going to believe your words. That I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to believe the good report, ignoring the bad report, the evil report, and I'm gonna move forward in the spirit of Khalid and Joshua.
The thing is, on that, it could be that, a lot of things may not look the way that they may not be the way that they look or the way that it may seem. For example, there is an opinion, okay, and I can't quantify this. This was somebody showed me this inside over Shabbat like a couple months ago, but it was Arizal was writing about the generation of Noah and the generation of Babel, and like how these generations had such tremendous desire and power, but it was all rooted in darkness, right? And they connected to it through darkness. So there's an Ari that says that many of the greatest souls from the generation of Noah and the generation of Babel were reincarnated and were the generations that received the Torah on Mount Sinai. That's an opinion, right? So you're saying the strongest vessels from two of the most wickedest generations are now put in a position with that same power, but now to use to bring down God's light. So like when we're trying to understand ourselves, we could have been Chinese warriors in ancient Asian antiquity, or in India or whatever. But in this lifetime, you have this dilemma of connecting to the Torah in this particular way. Right now, why? Okay, so this is that thing, but as a collective, I don't know. With the reincarnation, it changes the whole thing. There's that people that just are born with certain things that don't make sense that they like certain foods or want to live certain places and travel certain places. Like I tell you, I had this friend that is living in Budapest. For sure, some type of weird past life thing there. You know what I'm saying? And he's like reliving it, right? So people go through these different things. So yeah, you could connect it to Israel. I mean, in concept, the righteous people. I see myself as righteous, but it's just saying in general, the souls have many, many lifetimes. We're talking about from the time of Adam and Eve, from that whatever that new creation of the world was, right? That started with Bereshit, right? That dynamic is like there's souls that were here. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you in that. It's just opening up the world of potential of what things could be and where I as an individual could come from. You know what I mean? Like I may be could have been Japanese in my past life, and lived in a certain level of luxury, right? And so in this lifetime, I have certain struggles I didn't have in my lifetime, relationship with God and all types of things. I'm just saying people could have Middle Eastern, it just depends. It's the soul. It's always, it's an ongoing thing. So yes, I think I agree. Did any reflections on the point I just said? Or?
No, no, that's, I think it was beautifully spoken, because what it does, and not to limit ourselves, but it is, I think that it's important to understand when we talk about the soul, that because that the soul itself, the identity of the soul itself could be, it's God's creation. And let me ask you this here: do you believe that, as far as the sparks and the flames, are those all? Do they represent all souls of humanity, or are we just talking about the souls of Jacob?
The thing is, and I will refer to the Rob Berg on this. We understand. We know that a large percentage of descendants of Jacob are people that don't even know that they're descendants, right? People have been mixed in, other nations or whatever. So we understand the reality of the people that have a very big desire, right? Because, Abraham's father was an idol maker, but he was the biggest idol maker. You know what I'm saying? And in that desire that he had to be or to become the most influential idol maker, that was rooted in darkness and impurity. But he gave birth to a son who had the same desire, power, but it was rooted in Kedusha, right? Rooted in holiness and sanctification. So the frame of reference is saying that when we talk about Jacob or not Jacob, there could be people say they're by Jacob and they're not really. And there's people who would be against the children of Jacob who are actually, you know what I mean? It's not so clear, right? But we do understand that people have such a high desire level that they're able to look past, the system, the design, and say like, there's something more behind that reality, and I'm going to go on a mission to find it. Right, that person could be grown up in a Jewish religious environment, and he has to find it. He could grow up in an environment that was far away from the Torah and far away from anything, a whole different part of the world, and he or she has to find it. Right, so everyone has to find that truth, and the people who have the biggest desire to reach that truth are the people that they refer to as the descendants of Jacob. The descendants of Jacob represent the highest desire of connection to God, right? So some of those people, are born into Jewish homes. Some of those people are born into Christian homes, so people born in Muslim homes and Buddhist and Taoist and all these other things, but they eventually leave those mechanisms and bind themselves with the Torah, right? Like Rav Ashlag's family was very, he came from a whole lineage, a whole dynasty lineage, but he had to go in his own way, right? He had to go and connect to God in his own way, even though, yes, he grew up and it was all this holiness and blessings and all these things. Yeah, but for him to bind himself completely to the Torah and the mitzvot, he had to go on his journey, right? And that's the same thing for all of us. So it may seem like someone has an advantage, or it may seem like someone is closer, but all these things are illusions. We all are starting at the same starting line, and we're not even racing against each other, right? The perception that there's other lanes and other people we're racing against, that's what we have to remove, right? Like we're only in a lane by ourselves, and we're just trying to interpret, God's will as we go forward. And so that's the idea going into Shabbos, is thinking about this idea of the soul and how we treat Shabbat, right, and how we relate to Shabbat from the standpoint that this is one of the few times that every aspect of my soul is being fed light. And so that's why it's like so important to do as many things, not work obviously, but things within rest, things that are permitted to us, and just being involved in studying, being involved in connection, being involved in affection and connection and love, and this, because all these aspects of the self, the physical self that are involved in these actions, all receive tremendous light. So we could end it here if anyone else has any last things to say before we jump off.
I'll say something just, quickly. Listening to share today and both with dialogues that you guys just had, it makes me think about my father's yard site is next week, and it makes me think like the month of ER, like you were saying, it's a month of healing, and I'm looking at like it's a month of healing of the soul. So Baruch Hashem, that my father, he transitioned during this time. So I can look at it from a Kabbalistic lens of saying, okay, it was definitely a month of healing, time of the Omer, obviously, and how ER is it's like the Vav, connecting Pesach to Shavuot. So this month of connection, and I'm looking at it from that lens, because like being his son, Ben is a builder. So I'm building on my father's legacy. I'm building on the connection. I'm building on the healing of the cleaning of his soul. So it's like, Baruch Hashem, you guys were talking, it just gave me that insight. So it's like something I can kind of move towards, next week. And I mean, Rob, me with my, how I kind of view things Kabbalistically. So I'm always trying to, make connections and Kavanah and meditation. So that's something I'm gonna add to it. So Baruch Hashem, total about to both of you.
So yeah, so that's a very important point for all of us. Is being your father's yard site. It's you know try to have as much as your father in mind for Shabbos, right? Because it's the Shabbos before his yard site, right? So it's a very special Shabbat, and so just any little extra things, reading, learning a little bit extra, teaching a little bit extra, telling stories about your father, different moments, especially over the Shabbat table if you can, is really important. Just to just talk about, just I remember when this happened when I was this age, or he said this, or he used to do that, and just let that out and be okay with that emotion, because all of that is a support, right? And then because you're doing it on Shabbat, you're doing it over such sanctity, that elevates, and is a support mechanism, in the heaven. So, and we'll talk about it, in terms of other things we'll do during the week to elevate. What day exactly is it on? Otunu?
It's on May 7th, so it would be I want to say 16th of ER was the actual date.
16th.
I believe so. Yes, I know
So
it's May 7th on it.
So it's two days before Lakba Omer, because I think Lakba Omer is the 18th.
Yes.
All right, so we'll get specific on it. But we'll do something. We'll do a special limud, special learning on that night, God willing. What day is that, by the way?
That would be. I'm looking at the calendar. I got my calendar all off. That's Wednesday. It'll be next Wednesday,
Okay. Yeah,
May
so we should.
7th. But I'll find it on the system VR. I think that's gonna be. I'll find what that is.
All right, so we'll figure it out. But anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah, but the concept is this whole process of the neshama, the soul, the correction of the soul. You know, understanding that life in essence is walking into a movie theater, and as we know, in different theaters within a movie, the super theater, right? You have all these mini rooms that have their own movies playing, and life is an experience of going into one theater into another. I know everyone did that at least once when they were a kid. You know, you go in to see one movie and then you go to leave it. I mean, it's not the best thing, but you know, we did it, right? But the point is, that's a metaphor for life, right? And we have the ability to change the movie. Now, the thing is, instead of having to get up and walk outside of the theater, you know, we're seeing like what Otinon, what he's doing is saying like, hey, I am looking at it from the Kabbalistic lens. So now he's applying a mechanism of deeper analytical understanding, right? Which creates a deeper analytical response from him, right? And so now he's built this new relationship with this movie, right? Some people could say like, oh, this is this is a, he's a wow. My dad transitioned during the time of healing, and we were just learning Rav Ashlag the Shabbos before the Erev Shabbos before his yard site, and he's talking about the resurrection of the dead. And the rabbi teaching it is making that connection, right? So everything's happening, you know, for a reason, right? And everything is all for, you know, not just the good, but it's for our correction. And the correction should give us the most pleasure. Like we always use the example of people working out in a gym, and that dynamic of working out in the gym, you know, is a painful process. You know, like people are sweating, they're making faces, you know, depending on your complexion, you're turning red, you know, maybe, you know, and the blood is rushing towards your face, right? And so you have this whole experience, and but at the end of the day, you know that you're getting somewhere. You know, you
Excuse me,
yeah, go ahead.
Sarah,
Yeah.
I have a question. Can you explain quickly what what is the the understanding why we like well say classes in honor of someone who has passed away and also like give charity and gives a deca
Mm.
during that time. What is the actual like connection to giving the deca like in honor of a loved one who we want to have more elevated please. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Um, all right. Anyways, so the thing is, okay, so it's two rabbis who wrote about this. One, the Baal Shem Tov wrote about it, and then also Magid Dover. So the thing is like this. So when a person leaves this world, and we call that we refer to it as their yard site. What happens is the soul goes through this process for like several days, right? That's why people sit Shiva. They go through a process of 7 days that the upper aspects of their soul go up to the heavens, right? And so when they go up to the heavens, they stand after those several days in front of the heavenly court, right? And they're judged on the sins of their lives, but all of the sins of their lives that they're judged on that day is the minor sins. So like, you know, not the biggest things, whatever. And if your minor sins outweigh your good deeds, you know, then you go to you go to the heavens, right? But there's different levels of the heavens and different categories within the different levels of the heavens. So every year, every 365 days, that person is called to trial again. And they're judged on a higher level of sins. So they start with the lowest levels of sins, and then from there they most likely will elevate, you know, assuming they're a good person or a decent person or, you know, just average in a way. He'll go or she'll go to a higher level, and then the next year they stand in front of the court again, and this goes on and on and on and on until the soul achieves a certain level of correction, right? Now the thing is, the people who are on the ground, like it says during Rosh Hashanah, that on Rosh Hashanah, even the dead are judged, right? And so it's a big story, right? The sages talk about it a lot. What does it mean that what does it mean that what does it mean that the dead are judged on Rosh Hashanah and they're not even alive, right? Or haven't been alive for years? It's what they left behind. So whatever they've done, if they like say they left a mikvah, right? Their family built a mikvah. Like I know this lady, who passed away, Rebbitzin, and they built a mikvah in her honor, right? So that mikvah that they built in her honor, every time someone uses it, she receives a support for that in the heavens, right? I mean, her whole family, but specifically it's in her honor, right? So it's a mitzvah you did in her honor. So on that day specifically, any mitzvahs that are done on the yard site, those mitzvahs go up and they testify on behalf of the person standing in court, right? So they're standing in court. This could be the 5th year of their anniversary, or 10th year, or 2nd year, 3rd year, whatever it is. That when people are doing mitzvahs on them, they're creating angels that go up and they battle in defense of that person on how they should be elevated to a higher levels of heaven. So anything, any charity you could give at whatever level, or any, that's a big one, right? Because that's a big connection. Also, the dynamic of getting other people to do mitzvahs. So sometimes people will bring like l'chaim, like they'll bring like a bottle of like whiskey or something, to the shul in the morning, and get all the guys to make a blessing in honor of their father. So they have like, or their mother, they have their mother's name, father's name, and then people say blessings on that day, or somebody may lead the prayers, or it's all these different things that you can do to bring more mitzvahs. But some families, they do big things, you know what I mean? Like it just, all of them could do anything. They could all buy each other presents, in the honor of that person. They could give to the homeless, they could give to the needy, you know what I mean? But the point is creating mitzvahs in this world, and the mitzvahs that we create in this world turn to angels in the upper worlds that testify on behalf of the people on those times. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is so beautiful. So it's like my mind is just thinking like if we have a loved one and on their yard site, we're thinking of them and they are a part of us, and we are doing these mitzvahs and so forth on their behalf as they are going, before the judge. And so it's as if we remember them in such a way that it almost well, I'm not saying almost, but it just resonates of their importance and their righteousness potentially in our lives or whatever. It just makes me think like they were just that important that we are 5 years in, 10 years in, still thinking of them and wanting to do good in their honor. That's what I kind of got from it, but it's very beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would say just on that point, the thing is that it's not so much that we remember them, for sure it's that, but the main thing is people are doing mitzvahs in their name. That's what the creator, that's what the angels, that's what the whole positive, that there's people in this world doing mitzvahs in their name, say 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 30 years, 3 months, whatever it is, right? The point is just saying, so that dynamic is that the mitzvahs that are being done in that person's name go up to testify. So yes, on our end, we are remembering, which is, remembrance is a mitzvah, right? Honoring, our relatives, honoring our parents, all these things are big things. But the main thing as it relates to the yard site is that the fact that the person who's standing in heaven in front of the heavenly courts has mitzvahs being done in their name, and those mitzvahs are acting as advocacies or advocators for that person to go to a higher level of heaven. Go ahead. Yeah.
Very clear. Okay.
So in other words, if you're in a position to be able to do certain things, like for example, building that mikvah,
mm-hmm.
They basically created a residual, like we say, residual income, residual income in the heavens.
Yep.
Man, that's powerful.
That's how they're doing it. And so that, like, and even if you go to like places like, and I was really into this for a while, and I'm still into it, but one of the things is like a lot of the holy sites here in Israel are like kind of controlled by certain nonprofits, and they make sure that the holy sites are built up and the construction, and they do nuances and new technologies and all this stuff. And they have committees and fundraisers, and we're talking about where Rachel's buried, where Rabbi Shimon is buried. You know what I mean? Like unbelievable people. So it's a huge thing, and so you see people's names on these walls. It's not just like they're getting notoriety, but they're part of those mitzvahs. You know what I mean? That everyone who comes there, everyone who comes into those places, like you're connected to these people. So yeah, we should definitely, and that's like I told you, I may have mentioned this before, but one of my rabbis, Rabbi Avraham Brachman, blessed memory, he used to say all the time. He says like the biggest trick of how, I don't like the word trick, but the biggest like mechanism of how Jews make a lot of money is because they, at the beginning of each month or at the beginning of the year, they say that they want to give so much money in charity. They say, we want to give $1 million in charity, and we want to give to this organization or whatever. We want to do this. So God had to provide them 10 million in business, right? Because he has to give 10%. So the whole aim of the making of the money is just to be able to do mitzvahs. Yes, you're going to enjoy that other 90%. But if you're like, no, I want to be able to do this and that, and I want to be able to provide this. I want to remove this suffering. I want to provide more. Like there's so many like Shabbat houses that are here in Jerusalem that are like religious families that literally host meals every Shabbat for people who don't have meals. You're never without a meal on Shabbat holidays here in Jerusalem, right? Because there's a homeless population, right? And there's people. But there's families that literally just host, and there's people who fund these meals, right? It's the most amazing thing. I would never, as long as I'm in Jerusalem, I would never have a problem. It doesn't matter what's going, you know what I mean? So it's all about the mitzvahs, right? It's all about that connection, because that's what God creates the money, right? God creates, the situation, right? And so it's when we have that aim that the income that I make is here to serve the Creator, he has to bless us with abundance. He has to create miracles. Like, whoa, where did that come from? And how did that happen? Because didn't you say you were going to give this? So now, so that's one of the things that the rabbis told us in yeshiva in terms of how to create Jewish wealth, is to focus on the aspect of the amount of charity one wants to give per year, per month type of thing. And then from there, God has to assist. He has to think big. But the thinking big and going outside of and bigger clients and bigger partnerships and bigger things, he's only doing that not because of his own desire. He's doing it because, no, this is the client that could pay the money that allows me to do it. But I can't make the client do it. Hashem has to do that. I'm just making myself available, right? I'm thinking bigger. I'm going after more. I'm going to collect more. Not because money is also a brainwash mechanism. Right? They say, oh, $100,000 is money, $1 million is money, $10 million is money, $100 million. Not really. That's the design of the system that we live in. Right? And so that aspect of being able to push ourselves past that thinking, because it affects everybody, right? Oh, wow, that's a great salary. It's like, but wait, what does that mean? It's the same man who has the same biological structure as me, and even less wisdom, is able to do that. Why am I not? Because I'm a spiritual man. I can't make money like him. I only could do it through holiness, right? So I have to have those things in mind. So when we talk about the dynamics of the yard site and the elevations of people's souls, it's just that's the thing. So yeah, so there's families that are just making a ton of mitzvahs, and that's why they keep generational wealth. Like, where does it come from? Wealth comes from God. Okay, so my great grandfather created this endowment or created this trust, and they're funding this university, they're doing this, they give this, they're funding this hospital, this dynamic, this blah, blah, blah. And then, okay, so that's now it's in the family. We have that goodwill for the last 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, 150 years, in the family, right? My sister, she used to teach at Columbia, right? No one likes Columbia anymore, but the point is saying they're alumni. Right? These people have been invested into this university for centuries. You know what I mean? And their kids go, they're part of the institutions, the whole thing. So the point is just saying that that's where the game is at, right? That's what the game is at. The game is being put in a situation where you're able to create massive amount of mitzvahs in the world and assist as many people and help as many people And on top, I mean, you're just doing it for the sake of heavens, but there is a residual effect to that, and families become blessed through that, through helping patients, helping, disabilities. It's not just limited to like, people doing Torah, but there's like other things that enrich the quality of life of other human beings, right? And if the consciousness is serving God through charity, then you're part of that. You're part of all the people who got healed from that research or that, new fiber optic, or I don't know, I'm not even saying anything, but the point is just saying that's the idea and that's the concept. And so, yeah, that's the frame of reference when we're thinking about the soul. We're thinking about souls that are not here. We're thinking about souls that are coming down. We think about the expansive soul on Shabbat, and we're connecting that to this idea of correction. And when we talk about this week's Torah portion, this idea of fixing evil speech, where does speech come from, right? Where does the breath come from, right? So we're talking about the aspect of refinement of the soul even by here too as well. Baruch atah Adonai le'olam.